The day Emma and Mark moved into their new home was bright and full of promise. After months of searching and planning, they had finally found the perfect place, a quiet street lined with maple trees. It's a kind of neighborhood where people waved to each other and children played outside without a care. Emma, a proud member of the military, was especially eager to settle in. She had spent years moving from base to base, and this time they wanted to build a life that felt permanent as the moving truck pulled away. Emma stood on the porch, the late morning sun warming her face. Boxes were scattered around, and Mark was inside unpacking, but for a moment she allowed herself to breathe in the feeling of new beginnings. This was more than just a house. It was a fresh chapter. But even in this peaceful scene, Emma couldn't shake a small sense of unease. As she moved the car into the driveway, she noticed a woman watching from across the street, a woman who didn't smile, whose eyes seemed to study every detail. Emma figured it was just a curious neighbor. Still, the feeling lingered over the next few days. Emma threw herself into making the house a home. She arranged furniture, planted flowers, and even unpacked a small framed photo of her unit, a reminder of the community she had left behind but carried with her. Mark was her biggest cheerleader, helping to hang shelves and setting up their living room with care. Yet, the quiet tension from the first day didn't fully fade. One afternoon, as Emma pulled into the driveway after a long shift, she saw the same woman standing nearby. This time, she introduced herself as Karen. She was a longtime resident, with a sharp gaze but polite tone. "I noticed your car was parked a bit differently than usual," Karen said. "We like to keep things consistent here." Her words were careful but firm. Emma nodded, trying to keep the peace. "I appreciate that. Okay. I'm still getting used to the neighborhood routines." Karen smiled thinly. "Of course. It's just important we all follow the guidelines for the good of the neighborhood." Emma thanked her and went inside, wondering if the woman's watchfulness was a sign of welcome or something else. That evening, she told Mark about Karen's visit. "Sounds like you made a friend," Mark joked. Emma smiled but shrugged. "Maybe. I hope so." The days that followed brought more subtle reminders of the neighborhood's watchful eyes. Notes about lawn care, gentle hints about parking, and a general sense that Emma and Mark were under close observation. Emma understood the importance of rules but also felt the weight of expectations. One evening, while Emma was cooking dinner, there was a knock at the door. Opening it, she found Karen standing with a polite but serious expression. "I wanted to talk about the parking again," Karen said. "There have been some concerns." Emma listened patiently, explaining that her work schedule sometimes meant she arrived late and parked where she could. She offered to adjust, but Karen's tone suggested that wasn't quite enough. Before Emma could respond, Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, hesitated, and then said quietly, "I'm going to have to report this to the authorities." Emma's heart sank. She hadn't expected the situation to escalate, especially not so soon. The next day, officers arrived at Emma's door. Calm and respectful, they asked a few questions and then requested to see identification. When Emma showed her military ID, the mood shifted instantly. The officers exchanged nods and spoke with a new level of respect. Karen, watching nearby, suddenly went silent as the officers left. Emma closed the door and took a deep breath. She knew this was just the beginning of a longer story, a story about assumptions, respect, and the unexpected ways people reveal themselves. Mark came home that evening to find Emma quietly unpacking the last of the boxes. They exchanged a look equal. Parts resolve and hope. This was their new beginning. And they were ready to face whatever came next. After the police left, the neighborhood felt strangely quiet, as if the day's events had unsettled the usual rhythm. Emma and Mark tried to focus on their unpacking, but the weight of what had happened lingered in the air. Okay. Emma knew that moving into a new neighborhood always came with adjustments. Okay. But she hadn't expected to feel so watched or judged right. From the start, Karen's presence seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. She was polite, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made Emma uneasy. One afternoon, while Emma was tending to the small garden she had planted near the porch, Karen appeared at the fence, arms crossed, watching quietly. "I just want to make sure everything is in order," Karen said, stepping closer. "You know, the neighborhood has standards we all try to maintain." Emma nodded carefully. "I understand. I'm happy to learn whatever I need to." Karen's gaze flickered to the driveway, where Emma's car was parked a little askew. "Parking can be tricky here. We'd like to keep things consistent for everyone's benefit." Emma smiled gently. "I'm still getting used to it. I appreciate you letting me know." Karen's expression softened just a bit, but there was still a hint of reservation. "It's important we all respect the neighborhood's ways. We've lived here a long time, and it's helped keep everything peaceful." Emma considered her words. It wasn't hostility, exactly. It was more like caution, a need to protect what Karen and others had built over the years. That evening, Emma shared the encounter with Mark. "She seems like she wants things to stay the same," Emma said. "But it feels like they don't want new people to really belong." Mark frowned. "Sometimes people hold on to routines because change feels uncertain. It's up to us to show them we're here for the right reasons." Emma agreed. "I just want to be part of the neighborhood, not a source of trouble." In the following days, Emma made an effort to be visible in the neighborhood, not just as a resident, but as a neighbor. She smiled and waved when people walked by, stopped to chat briefly with those who seemed open, and even brought over some homemade cookies for nearby houses. Slowly, she began to see small shifts. Neighbors who once glanced away now offered a quick hello. Children playing nearby smiled when she passed, yet Karen's watchful eyes remained never far. One Saturday, Emma noticed a flyer posted on the community bulletin board. It listed upcoming neighborhood events, along with rules and reminders about parking and property care. At the bottom, a note encouraged residents to respect the traditions that keep our neighborhood strong. Emma took a deep breath. The message was clear. Belonging came with expectations. That afternoon, Emma tried parking her car exactly as the flyer suggested, but it meant a long walk to the house carrying groceries. The next day, she arrived home late from work and found no alternative but to park in her usual spot. The day after that, Karen appeared at the door again. "We need to talk about the parking situation," she said quietly. Emma invited her in, hoping to find common ground. "I know you're trying," Karen admitted, "but sometimes the rules help avoid bigger problems. It's not personal." Emma nodded. "I want to follow the rules, but sometimes my schedule doesn't match the ideal." Karen looked away, then back. "I understand more than you think." Conversation ended without resolution, but it opened a door, however small, to dialogue. Later that week, neighbors gathered for a casual barbecue in a nearby yard. Emma and Mark attended, hoping to build bridges. Karen was there, keeping to herself but polite enough to nod in greeting. As the sun set, Emma looked around the circle of neighbors, sharing stories and laughter. She felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. The neighborhood was a puzzle of traditions, expectations, and unspoken rules. She was learning its edges and curves, trying to fit without losing herself. But beneath it all, Emma held on to one truth. She was proud of who she was, and she belonged here as much as anyone else. And she wasn't going anywhere. The barbecue had been a tentative step toward easing the tension. Emma and Mark had hoped it would mark the beginning of new friendships, or at least mutual respect. The neighborhood's chatter was lighter that evening, and even Karen had offered a brief, if guarded, smile. But beneath the surface, some old patterns remained stubborn. A few days later, Emma returned home after a long shift, exhausted but glad to finally be back in her own space. It was late, and the street was mostly quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog. She pulled her car into the driveway and stepped inside, eager to relax. Suddenly, a sharp knock came at the door. Emma's heart jumped. She wasn't expecting anyone. Mark had stepped out earlier to run an errand and wouldn't be back for another hour. Alone, Emma opened the door to find two police officers standing quietly on the porch. Behind them, Karen's face appeared, her expression unreadable. "Good evening, ma'am," one officer said politely. "We received a call regarding your vehicle parking." Emma blinked, surprised but composed. "I'm sorry if there's been any trouble. I do my best to follow the neighborhood's guidelines." The officer nodded. "We just wanted to check and make sure everything's okay." Karen stepped forward. "I thought it was important to report it. Rules are rules, and if everyone followed them, there wouldn't be problems." Emma glanced at Karen, noticing the tightness in her jaw. "I understand the importance of rules," she said gently. "I'm sorry if I caused any worry." The officers asked Emma for her identification. Calmly, she reached into her wallet and pulled out her military ID card, handing it to the officer. The moment the officer saw the card, his posture changed, respect and warmth replacing formality. He looked at Emma with genuine appreciation. "Thank you for your service," he said sincerely. Karen's eyes widened. She had been watching the exchange, and for the first time her usual composure faltered. She didn't speak. Emma smiled faintly, but said nothing. The officers completed their check, then nodded and stepped back. "It looks like everything is in order," one officer said, handing the ID back. "Thank you for your cooperation." As they left, Karen lingered for a moment before turning away and walking down the street. Her usual confident stride replaced by an uncharacteristic hesitation. Emma closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a slow breath. The night felt heavier now, but also quieter. The unexpected visit had brought to light things that words alone could not dot. Mark returned shortly after. Finding Emma sitting at the kitchen table, her expression thoughtful. "They came by?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Karen called them. But when they saw my ID, everything changed." Mark sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. People can be quick to judge." Emma squeezed his hand. "It's not just about judgment. It's about respect and understanding." I wish Karen could see that. The next morning, word of the police visit had spread quietly among neighbors. Some expressed sympathy and support, while others stayed silent, unsure how to respond. At the local coffee shop, a few familiar faces approached Emma, offering nods and small smiles. The incident had shifted something unspoken in the neighborhood's dynamic. Meanwhile, Karen kept to herself. The usual sharp remarks and watchful eyes were absent. It was as if the realization of Emma's service had quietly changed the script. Emma wondered if Karen's silence was relief, regret, or something else entirely. That evening, Emma and Mark talked long into the night about what had happened on what might come next. "We can't change everyone overnight," Mark said. "But maybe this is a step. Maybe it will open doors." Emma nodded slowly. "I want to believe that. I want to be part of a neighborhood where we look out for each other, where respect isn't just expected, but shared." They made a silent promise to keep moving forward, to stay patient and kind even when it was hard, because home wasn't just a place on a map. It was where people stood together, learning and growing, and Emma was ready to build that home, one day at a time. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains as Emma prepared for another early shift. The events of the previous night still lingered in her mind: the police visit, Karen's silent retreat, and the unexpected ripple it had caused in the neighborhood. She had learned long ago that life could be unpredictable, and that sometimes the smallest moments carried the heaviest meaning. Today, however, she felt a renewed determination to face whatever challenges might come with grace and strength. As she stepped out of the house to start her day, Emma noticed a few neighbors exchanging glances near the corner. A subtle shift had taken place. Where there was once quiet curiosity or avoidance, now there was a sense of cautious respect. Some nodded in greeting, others offered small smiles. Emma returned their gestures warmly, feeling the tentative bonds beginning to form. Later that day, the HOA board gathered for their monthly meeting. Emma and Mark decided to attend, hoping to engage with the neighborhood on a more personal level. The meeting room was modest but bright, filled with familiar faces and a few new ones. Karen sat near the back, her expression unreadable. As the meeting progressed, topics ranged from landscaping standards to upcoming social events. When the subject of neighborhood guidelines arose, a hush fell over the room at that moment. One of the officers who had visited Emma's home the night before was present as a guest speaker. He shared stories about the importance of community support and mutual respect, emphasizing how understanding each other's backgrounds helped create stronger neighborhoods. His words resonated deeply, especially when he spoke about the sacrifices made by service members and their families. When it came time for questions, Emma raised her hand, calm and clear. She spoke about her desire to contribute positively to the neighborhood and about how small misunderstandings could escalate if left unaddressed. The room listened. Karen's eyes met Emma's across the table. There was a flicker of something, perhaps recognition or reconsideration. After the meeting, as people gathered outside, Karen approached Emma. "I want to apologize if I made things difficult," she said quietly. "I didn't know your background before, and I admit I judged too quickly." Emma smiled, surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Karen. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot." Karen nodded. "I guess sometimes it's easy to hold on to old ways without thinking about what we might be missing," Emma replied. "Change can be hard, but it's worth it when it brings us closer." That conversation marked a turning point. In the days that followed, the neighborhood began to shift. Conversations became more open and friendly. Neighbors invited Emma and Mark to casual gatherings, eager to learn more about their lives and experiences. Emma took every opportunity to share stories from her military service about teamwork, resilience, and community that resonated beyond uniform or rank. Karen, too, started showing up more often in these social moments. The sharp edges of her former demeanor softened, replaced by genuine interest and a willingness to listen. One afternoon, Emma found Karen tending to the community garden plot, kneeling among the flowers. "Need a hand?" Emma offered. Karen looked up, surprised, then smiled. "I'd like that." Together they worked side by side, their conversation flowing easily. They talked about their hopes for the neighborhood, the challenges of change, and the power of understanding. For the first time since moving in, Emma felt truly at home, not just in the house she had bought, but in the neighborhood she was helping to build. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the street, Emma and Karen stood back to admire the garden. "It's beautiful," Karen said softly. Emma nodded. "It's just like new beginnings." After the neighborhood meeting and the unexpected apology from Karen, Emma felt a cautious sense of hope. Things seemed to be moving in the right direction, slowly but surely. Yet, beneath the surface, there remained an undercurrent of quiet reflection, a pause in the neighborhood's usual rhythm as everyone processed the recent changes. Emma and Mark spent their mornings tending to their home and gradually unpacking the last boxes. The couple's life was still full of the usual demands: work, errands, and daily routines. But now there was an added layer of awareness. They knew that what they had endured was more than just a parking dispute or a misunderstood rule. It was about trust, acceptance, and breaking down walls built over years of habit and fear of change. One evening, Emma sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the neighborhood settling into twilight around her. From her seat, she watched families returning from their day. Children's laughter carried softly on the breeze. It was peaceful, yet Emma understood the complexities beneath that calm. Mark joined her, settling into the chair beside hers. "You okay?" he asked. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I am, but I can't help thinking about Karen. I wonder what she's really feeling right now." Mark smiled gently. "Change is hard. Maybe she's working through it in her own way." Emma sipped her tea, feeling the truth in his words. She remembered the moment Karen had gone silent after the police saw her military ID. The moment when assumptions had crumbled into something new. That silence had spoken volumes. The next day, Emma found herself walking through the neighborhood with a quiet purpose. She stopped by the community garden, where Karen was tending to the flowers. They exchanged greetings, but Karen's usual confident tone was softer, more thoughtful. "It's been a lot to take in," Karen admitted. "I never realized how quick I was to judge." Emma smiled warmly. "None of us start off perfect. What matters is what we do next." Karen looked around at the garden's colorful blooms. "This place, it's like a fresh start, isn't it?" "It is," Emma agreed. "For all of us." In the following weeks, Emma noticed subtle shifts not only in Karen but across the neighborhood. The air of suspicion that had hung over them like a cloud began to lift. Conversations grew more genuine. Smiles became easier. Even the HOA notices changed tone, focusing less on rules and more on community spirit. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving for work, she saw Karen speaking with a group of neighbors. They laughed together, a sound Emma hadn't heard from Karen before. It was a small moment, but for Emma, it felt monumental. Later, Emma shared this with Mark. "I think we're making progress," she said, slowly but surely. Mark nodded. Sometimes it takes time for people to see past their fears. Emma looked out the window, her heart full. She thought about the journey they had taken, from a tense first encounter to the quiet but meaningful steps toward understanding. That night, as Emma prepared for bed, she reflected on the lessons learned. Respect was more than just a word. It was a bridge built with patience, kindness, and the willingness to listen. She thought about her military service, about the values she held dear: honor, courage, and commitment. Those values guided her still, not just in her uniform, but in this new chapter of her life. Emma felt ready for whatever came next. The path wasn't always easy, but it was theirs to walk, together with Mark, with neighbors like Karen, and with the community slowly opening up, because home wasn't just where you lived. It was where you were seen, heard, and accepted, and that made all the difference. The days that followed felt lighter somehow. Emma and Mark woke each morning to a neighborhood that was beginning to shift from wary glances to genuine greetings. The tension that had once hung in the air seemed to be dissolving, replaced by small but meaningful gestures of goodwill. Emma found herself drawn into conversations she hadn't expected, neighbors asking about her military service, Mark chatting about his work, and even Karen offering an occasional smile when they crossed paths. The walls that had separated them were slowly coming down, one brick at a time. One Saturday morning, the community garden had become a hub of activity. A group of neighbors, including Emma, Mark, and Karen, gathered to plant flowers and freshen up the space. The atmosphere was warm and collaborative, a marked change from the cautious distance that had defined their interactions not long ago. Karen worked beside Emma, hands covered in soil as they planted vibrant marigolds and delicate lavender. She glanced over with a small smile. "You know, I never imagined I'd enjoy this as much as I am." Emma laughed softly. "It's amazing what shared work can do. It brings people together." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "I guess I was so focused on what I thought should be that I didn't see what could be." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Neighborhood Association president, Mr. Lawrence, a man known for his strict adherence to rules, but also his genuine care for the neighborhood. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice warm but formal. "It's wonderful to see so many working together today." He paused, looking at Emma and Karen, especially to those who have helped breathe new life into this garden. Emma felt a surge of pride but kept her expression humble. "Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. We just want to contribute." Mr. Lawrence smiled. "And that is what makes a neighborhood strong. It's about community, respect, and understanding." As the day wore on, conversations flowed freely. Stories were shared, laughter echoed, and the garden took on a renewed beauty. 'Twas more than just flowers growing, it was relationships blossoming. Later that evening, Emma and Mark sat on their porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The neighborhood was quieter now, but the feeling of connection lingered. Mark reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. "Looks like you were right. Bridges really can be rebuilt." Emma smiled, her heart full. "It takes effort from everyone, but it's worth it." Just then, Karen appeared at the gate, holding a small plate of freshly baked cookies. She hesitated for a moment, then called out, "For you and Mark. A thank you for everything." Emma rose and walked over, taking the plate with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Karen. This means a lot." Karen returned the smile, softer now than before. "I'm glad we're moving forward." As Karen walked away, Emma turned back to Mark. "I think this is just the beginning. There will still be challenges, but we're on the right path." Mark nodded. "Together, we can face whatever comes." That night, Emma reflected on the journey, the bumps and hurdles, the moments of doubt and the breakthroughs. She realized that while respect and understanding might start with individuals, they flourished only when a whole community embraced them. In her heart, she knew this neighborhood wasn't perfect, but it was growing, evolving, and healing, and she was proud to be part of that story. The weeks that followed brought with them a noticeable shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere. Emma and Mark found themselves no longer outsiders, but welcomed members of a community that was slowly but surely embracing change. The once tense and watchful eyes softened into smiles and friendly greetings. It wasn't just about tolerance anymore. It was about genuine connection. Emma often reflected on the unlikely journey that had led to this transformation. It all began with a misunderstanding over something as simple as parking. Yet that incident had unveiled deeper layers, preconceptions, fears, and a yearning for belonging on both sides. And it had taken patience, humility, and open hearts to bridge the divide. One Saturday morning, the neighborhood held a gathering at the community park, a potluck picnic designed to celebrate the spring and encourage neighbors to connect. Emma and Mark arrived early, carrying a dish of homemade lasagna and a basket of fresh fruit. The park was already filling with families, laughter, and the smell of grilled food. Karen was there too, chatting animatedly with some of the longtime residents. Emma watched her for a moment, noting the ease with which Karen moved through the crowd now. She no longer held herself apart but seemed genuinely engaged. Mark nudged Emma gently. "You ready to join in?" Emma smiled and nodded. She approached Karen, who turned and greeted her with a genuine smile. "I'm glad you're here," Karen said. "It's been a while since we all shared a meal like this." Together, they walked through the gathering, exchanging hellos and sharing stories. Conversations flowed naturally, from children's school projects to gardening tips, from weekend plans to favorite recipes. The barriers that had once separated neighbors now felt like distant memories. At one point, a young boy tugged at Emma's sleeve. "Are you the one who served in the military?" he asked with wide eyes. Emma knelt to his level, smiling warmly. "I did, yes. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have." The boy grinned. "My dad says you're a hero." Emma laughed. Softly, "We all have our parts to play." Nearby, Karen watched the interaction with a quiet smile. Later, she approached Emma and said, "You know, I underestimated how much your story would matter to everyone here. It's made me think about what we all bring to the table." Emma appreciated the honesty. We all have stories, and when we listen, we build something stronger. As the afternoon sun began to set, the picnic wound down. Neighbors lingered in small groups, reluctant to end the day. Emma and Mark stayed a little longer, savoring the feeling of belonging they had once thought impossible so soon after moving. Later that evening, as the neighborhood settled into quiet calm, Emma and Mark sat on their porch reflecting on the progress made. "I never imagined it would turn out like this," Mark said, shaking his head in disbelief. "From that first night with the police to now, this feels like a new beginning." Emma reached for his hand. "It's been a journey, for sure. But it's proof that respect and patience can change everything." She looked out at the street, bathed in soft moonlight, and felt a deep sense of peace. The neighborhood was no longer just a place to live, was a community growing into something better. As the stars twinkled above, Emma thought of all the days to come, filled with possibility and promise. Together, they would face whatever challenges remained. Stronger and united, because sometimes only takes one person willing to stand firm and open their heart to change the course of many. And Emma was proud to be that person. The morning sun spilled golden light across the quiet street, casting long shadows from the trees that lined the sidewalks. Emma stood at her front porch, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the warmth of the neighborhood's newfound harmony settle around her, like a comforting blanket. Months had passed since that tense evening when Karen had called the police. And a lot had changed since then. Today, the neighborhood looked different, not because the houses or yards had changed dramatically, but because the people had. The subtle distance and suspicion that once filled the air had been replaced by connection and understanding. The shared smiles, conversations over fences, and invitations to neighborhood events had woven a new fabric of community. Emma felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing she had been part of this transformation. It hadn't been easy. There were moments of frustration, uncertainty, and even hurt feelings, but the journey was worth every step. Mark appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Emma and leaned on the porch railing, taking in the peaceful morning scene. "Hard to believe this all started with a parking dispute," he said with a chuckle. Emma smiled, taking a sip of coffee. Sometimes it's the small things that reveal the biggest truths. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of laughter and footsteps. Emma's neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, approached, holding a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I thought you might enjoy these." Emma accepted the plate gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Garcia. That's so kind of you." Double quotes, Mrs. Garcia smiled. "We're all lucky to have you and Mark here. You've brought new energy to the neighborhood." Emma felt a flush of gratitude. "We're just happy to be part of the community." As Mrs. Garcia walked away, Karen emerged from her house carrying a basket of flowers. Their eyes met, and Karen offered a genuine smile, a far cry from the cold stares of months before. "Good morning, Emma," Karen said softly. "I was just on my way to add these to the garden." Emma nodded, touched by the gesture. "They're beautiful. Thank you." Karen hesitated for a moment, then spoke, with an honesty that surprised Emma. "I want to say I'm sorry for how I acted before. I didn't understand at first, but you helped me see things differently." Emma shook her head gently. "There's no need to apologize. We all have moments we're not proud of. What matters is moving forward." Karen smiled. "Agreed. I'm glad we've come this far." The 2 women stood together, surrounded by blooming flowers and the quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up. Later that day, neighborhood gathered for a spring festival, a celebration of growth, friendship, and new beginnings. Tables were set with homemade dishes, children played games, and music filled the air. Emma and Mark moved through the crowd, exchanging greetings and sharing laughs. Karen approached them, holding a small handmade card. "This is for you," she said. "I thank you for your patience and kindness." Emma took the card, opening it to find a simple message to new friends and fresh starts. Tears pricked at her eyes. "Thank you, Karen. That means more than I can say." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the celebration, Emma felt a profound sense of belonging. The neighborhood was no longer just a place to live, it was a community where respect, understanding, and kindness flourished. Mark pulled Emma close. "Here's to many more chapters together." Emma smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Together. In that moment, surrounded by friends old and new, Emma knew they had created something lasting. A home not defined by rules or misunderstandings, but by the people who chose to grow and change with open hearts. And as the stars began to twinkle above, she felt ready for whatever the future might bring. Because sometimes, the greatest victories come not from confrontation, but from the courage to forgive, to listen, and to walk forward hand in hand. The end.